Welcome to Unknown. I'm Brian Webb and my co-host Trenton Hooker, where we explore the odd, the bizarre, and sometimes unsettling. So make sure your seats and tray tables are in their full upright and locked positions, because things could get a little bumpy today because we're heading back to space.
We are, and a little bit back to Earth as well. We're talking disclosure. Are we in an age of change as it's happening in the United States and also around the world? Joining us now is Dr. Peter Skafish. He's co-founder of the Soul Foundation and also a cultural anthropologist. Dr. Skafish is also visiting scholar for the Center of World Religions at Harvard University. Dr. Skafish, thank you for joining us on Unknown.
Thank you, sir.
Now, we wanted to talk about UAP disclosure in the film The Age of Disclosure, which just premiered recently. One of the key points of that film is with Secretary of State Marco Rubio and his comments about UAPs, and also being told that the United States government has a legacy program where the technology from these UAPs is being reverse engineered also by private companies. Now, there was an interview with Fox News where Secretary Rubio couched that back a bit, saying that things were taken out of context and edited. We're going to play that clip right now.
I can't comment on the rest of the documentary. It has, as I said, claims from people that were former admirals, naval fighters, people with high clearances in government. Some of them are pretty spectacular claims. I'm not calling these people liars. I don't have independent knowledge that what they're saying is true. Mm-hmm. The one observation I had is we had people that did very important jobs in the U.S. government who are saying these things. So we have people with very high jobs in the U.S. government that are either A, liars, B, crazy, or C, telling the truth. And two of those three options are not good. But I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer. I don't have any point of, I don't want to call them liars. I just don't have any independent way to verify everything they said.
So Dr. Skafish, in that clip, Secretary Rubio was saying that this was 3 or 4 years ago when he was in the Senate, describing what he said were people had told him these things, and not things that he had firsthand knowledge of. But he described them as pretty spectacular claims with people with high clearances in government, and he just didn't have any independent way to verify what was said, and that there was some creative editing in that film.
Walking it back a little bit, would you say?
Yeah, walking it back a little bit, but people should understand, of course, this is the Secretary of State and the National Security Advisor, as you pointed out, the first person to have both positions since Henry Kissinger, commenting on UAP. So, of course, he's going to hedge his comments. But the key thing you said people should be aware of is that this interview took place 3 or 4 years ago. Well, that was precisely the time that the Secretary of State was the co-chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee. And that's very important to know, because as far as we can see, and this is how this is played out in Congress, UAP, in the traditional sense of UFOs, are an intelligence matter. So in Congress, this is something that the intelligence committees have jurisdiction over. So Rubio ended up holding the ball on the issue for a few years, and he had a staff member on that committee who did a great deal of work of bringing witnesses in to informally inform the committee of the reality of the program you're talking about, which, among other things, does allegedly the retrieval and reverse engineering of UAP vehicles and technology. Now, in that context, I know for a fact that Rubio had direct conversations with people associated with that program. I'll put it that way. And so he's heard firsthand the testimony. What he's saying is he hasn't seen firsthand the things they're talking about. And I think that he's absolutely correct to say that he can't verify this independently, because the only way to do that would be to get verification from someone directing that kind of program who, in a sense, had the goods in their hands, documents verifying it, or, even the sorts of technologies they're working on. But all that said, I'm highly confident that he's highly confident that a big part of that story is true.
Doctor, from my understanding, you have also heard from witnesses yourself over the years. What are they telling you? What are they seeing? What kind of craft are these? Do they describe their shape, their technology? Do they describe the beings at all? Are they human-like? Their communication at any level? What are these people actually saying they saw?
Well, I do know people who have, confided in me that they have seen that technology firsthand, that they've seen vehicles of this kind firsthand, and certainly that they've seen a lot of intelligence, classified information, scientific reports, analyses of recovered vehicles. And what they're describing is UFOs in the classic sense, whether they're double saucers, disc-shaped, something that looks like the proverbial Tic-Tac of the 2004 incident, but they're describing that kind of technology.
These objects had been observed for over 2 weeks, coming down from over 80,000 feet, rapidly descending to 20,000 feet, hanging out for hours, and then going straight back up.
We have to go slowly with this stuff because they do describe the kinds of things you're talking about, which are biological beings and so on. But, this is often a bit too much for the public to hear about. So what I'd say is, yes, they talk about those things, but I want to put the emphasis on the technology.
The U.S. government is operating with secrecy above congressional oversight with regards to UAPs.
Now that we know UAP are interacting with humanity, and these include unidentified submerged objects in the ocean, we should not turn a blind eye, but instead boldly face this new reality and learn from it.
One of the claims that was made in the film, Dr. Skafish 2, was that before the end of the first Trump administration, there was a push that maybe the president was going to make a reveal to the American public for the first time, disclose that UAPs are real and that this extraterrestrial vehicle technology is in the United States government possession. They had a program that they were working on. But we didn't get that. We didn't have that disclosure happen the last term. Do you feel like we are going to get a push in Trump 2.0 that the commander-in-chief is going to go to the podium, tell the American public these things exist and we have proof of it?
Well, I don't know about a push, but that may happen. Something to remember is that we saw a little bit of a push or a nudge during the Biden administration when there were shoot downs of unknown or anomalous objects or objects whose nature weren't reported to the public, including one over Alaska. And you saw a CNN reporter in the White House press briefing room during a press conference ask, listen, you guys have been talking about UAP for the last 4 years. Is this extraterrestrial technology? And that question was put right to the White House press secretary. So I think with the Secretary of State and several senators, big name senators in some case, talking about this stuff, you may see more fulsome media inquiries in the future. Now, would that tip this presidential administration into acknowledging that there's been longstanding knowledge of this in a component of the U.S. government? I think all bets are off. It's very difficult to know. What I will tell you is I have a colleague and friend in the intelligence community who is a veteran of very high level executive branch politics, who once said to me, look, you may not like the orange guy, but this administration is your best chance ever at breaking a historical pattern on this issue.
It was interesting in that documentary that many presidents don't know, and people feel like they shouldn't know the deepest, darkest secrets along these lines because, hey, they're temporary workers. They're here and gone in a few years. And this is more along the lines of the nuclear program that only a certain amount of people, maybe in the military or even private industry, know about. What's your take on that, and is that the right way to handle this?
Well, it wouldn't be the right way to handle it if we're talking about aliens in the everyday sense. Of course not. You would want the head of state of one of the most powerful countries in the world to know about that. But I do think that claim is probably exaggerated. There are a lot of indications that you had most presidents, probably up until the time of Bill Clinton, were given some kind of briefing about this, or were actually quite aware of it. Certainly in Truman's case, his White House made inquiries in 1952 to the Air Force when there were UAP flyovers over the Capitol. And we have different kinds of testimony coming from the intelligence community about what which president knew what, and so on. And there is someone who is interviewed in the Age of Disclosure who I know for a fact did an interview with a Carter administration cabinet official about the briefing that Jimmy Carter allegedly received.
So, Dr. Skafish, I want to get into about the Soul Foundation that you co-founded in 2023 with Stanford professor Dr. Gary Nolan. Can you tell us a little bit about what the Soul Foundation is, how you got into that, and your idea with pushing that forward?
Yeah, well, the Soul Foundation's a big project, and we've had, I think, a pretty significant impact on the UAP conversation and also the way academia is handling it. It's very new for scientists, social scientists, humanities people, legal scholars to take the UAP issue seriously. When I was a graduate student and a PhD student at Berkeley, another PhD student and I, who was a close friend, we would talk about this behind closed doors, okay? And we knew to, shut the office door and actually lock it so that we wouldn't be carrying the stigma of the subject at that time. So it took a long time for academics to feel comfortable working on this in public. And after 2017, when you saw the first acknowledgments from the intelligence community that, okay, this is real, that academics started to come out of the woodwork. Slowly but surely, we've come out. Now, the Soul Foundation was established in part because we knew that the U.S. government would need an advisory body composed of academics who weren't from the defense and intelligence world, who could advise on what kinds of scientific research would need to be done as disclosure was underway, and it's already underway, and also what the social and philosophical, theological implications of this are. And so we really started it to cover all bases, scientifically, social scientifically, but we also do advisory work with national governments. We've done that not just with Congress, but the Canadian Parliament, the Japanese Parliament, the EU Parliament. We've even engaged the EU Commission. And we do a lot of public education, and that's what we're best known for.
Doctor, we have to take a quick break. We're going to get back to this. We're going to talk about the societal implications of these questions. And also, did UFOs, UAPs start visiting us maybe when we started setting off nuclear weapons? Something like that, if you don't mind, and we'll hit you on the other side of this break.
You're watching Unknown, where we explore the bizarre, the mysterious, and sometimes unsettling. I'm Trenton Hooker. This is Brian Webb joining me. And we're continuing our discussion today with Dr. Peter Skafish. How does a cultural anthropologist become an expert, a researcher on unidentified anomalous phenomenon?
Well, why I'm interested in this, I think is too long of a story for here. But the way you get expertise is you're going to have to do a few things. You need to do research on this using whatever your methodology is. If you're an academic, so what a cultural anthropologist does is they do field work, which involves largely talking to people, spending time with them. So one source of my expertise is talking directly to people who have had encounters with UAP and even so-called non-human intelligences. Another thing you need to understand, if you want to understand the UAP thing, at least in the United States, is you need to understand the intelligence community and some things about the Department of Defense. And that's been a longstanding interest of mine. So when we got the Soul Foundation going and I became introduced to a lot of people who were coming out of the intelligence community who had either worked on this previously or they become interested in it independently. That allowed me to make sense of a lot of the claims they were making about longstanding secrecy and classified programs that really are not intelligible to a lot of other academics, let alone a lot of other educated people. And I'd say a third thing in my case is you need to take a very philosophical in the technical sense of philosophy. You have to understand philosophy as a tradition of thought in Europe and coming out of Greece, to take the long view on what the significance of UAP and so-called non-human intelligence are for human beings.
Doctor, let me, if you haven't noticed, Trenton is here to ask the intelligent questions. I'm here to ask the questions that a third grader might ask. So let me take you to nuclear sites and UAPs. What is the connection between the two? And do we think they maybe started showing up when we started blowing up nuclear bombs?
Well, that connection is pretty well established, and that's not a third grade question. It's a very important question. And look, you've got a lot of testimony coming not just now, but stretching back to the 1970s of people from the DoD and the intelligence community who have said, look, these things do come and monitor, and they seem to do reconnaissance over sites that are holding nuclear weapons and also where nuclear energy research is taking place. And that really goes back to the 1940s and 50s. Some of the most well-known UAP events from that time take place over places like White Sands Proving Ground or different Atomic Energy Commission research and development sites. So that's a very old story. That connection exists. We don't know the reason why. It would stand to reason, though, that we should look at our own trajectory of technological development and say, look, there's an obvious correlation between the frequency with which we get reporting of UAP and the emergence and use of nuclear weapons.
Dr. Skafish, I wanted to ask you, too, you were talking about the cultural implications of this technology, but going back to the 40s and 50s with what Brian was asking, with the dawn of the nuclear age in 1945, can you talk about, as a researcher, how you go back to some of these historic accounts where you have these takes that might be of the age and the language that's being used to describe the phenomenon in the time and place. But how do you walk through that as a researcher with recognizing that, yes, there was a cultural implication with science fiction, with how people were witnessing these things, and then getting to the meat of, is there a scientific truth that can be correlated with today's phenomenon that's being experienced?
Well, that's an excellent question. It gets to the heart of the matter of what these things are. There are people who think, and I think they're wrong about this, academics included, who feel that it was a very 1950s, 60s, 70s kind of human perception and interpretation that led people to see something very anomalous as a spaceship, as a disk, as a cylinder, as a flying triangle. And so by that interpretation of what that human interpretation was at the time, the idea is that we don't know really what these things are. They might not be technological. They might not really be there in the way we think they are. I think that's very, very wrong. What I find in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, into the 80s is a lot of consistency in reporting. People report things that are clearly vehicles, that often have features of vehicles that you would need if you were transporting a biological being inside. They see doors, they see window-like apertures, they see landing gear, they see other appendages sometimes that look like instruments. They even, in some cases, report writing on the side of the vehicles that they describe in colloquial terms as hieroglyphic. So I think the testimony from that age is so consistent that we have to accept that people were really describing what they saw, that their senses weren't deceiving them, and that the UAP themselves were not camouflaging themselves in some way too much to make the real nature unknown to us.
Well, I want to ask you a follow-up on this. So a common criticism that is thrown out there when we're talking about this age and going back to the 40s and what could be a conspiracy to keep this under wraps for 70, 80 years. is thrown around that the idea that how many people could keep this a secret and for how long. I wanted to ask your take on that with the history of the United States government. How is it possible that a group within the United States government, kind of a shadow government, if you will, could keep this information under wraps to getting out to credibly verify if it's true or not?
Well, one misconception I think a lot of people have about the intelligence community and the Department of Defense, and I throw in the Department of Energy there, is that these aspects of the United States government are bad at keeping secrets. They are excellent at keeping secrets. All you need to do is spend some time with people that have had great careers in those institutions to know that they're carrying hundreds, thousands of secrets with them that never see the light of day, whether they're operational, whether they concern scientific programs, whether they concern secret technologies. Just look at space today. None of us really know what's going on up there past what we can get out of a little bit of space media, which you guys do, or what you're hearing from space industry sources. There's a lot of classified stuff up there. My own work, where I've engaged intelligence community people coming out of the National Reconnaissance Office, I've certainly, now and then they let things slip to give you an idea of what's up there, and it's pretty astonishing. But all that said, you're asking a really crucial question, which is how could you keep a secret of this magnitude secret for so long without people knowing? Now, my first response to that is it's to some extent an open secret. It's not like there hasn't been the claim since the 50s that UAP are real, that they're real presences, they're not illusions, they're not rumors, and that the Air Force and the Central Intelligence Agency know about that and have efforts to engage them in some ways. I mean, that claim goes way back to the 1950s. And it's been confirmed in different ways by intelligence people since the early 60s. The very first director of the CIA, who held the position in, I believe, 1947 until about 1949, confirmed in the early 60s that what he was aware of in the late 40s with UFOs was not Soviet aircraft, not US aircraft, because what they were seeing were simply things at the time that no human technology was capable of. He said this in the early 1960s in the New York Times, and he said, look, behind the scenes, you have many people in the military who are very soberly concerned with this. And you've had other people in the 1960s, 1970s, 1990s, up till the president, coming out of the Central Intelligence Agency specifically, which to some extent has jurisdiction over the issue, confirming that this is real. So that's our best evidence that this is a secret, but the secret hasn't been perfectly kept.
Talk to us about reverse engineering. It almost seemed like from that documentary that I should worry that China or Russia is ahead of us, and I should be more worried about them than anybody from outer space. And then also want to ask you about the societal implications if this all comes out.
Well, okay, that's the claim, is that, the whistleblower, David Grush, who in some ways is like the Edward Snowden of UAP secrecy. He went to Congress in 2023 and basically put the goods on the table and said, look, I know for a fact that there's a reverse engineering program and does other things as well. And this has been kept secret from the public and so on. He one of his central claims was that there is a kind of low intensity arms race around reverse engineering. Now, that's a tougher one for someone like me to verify because there's this, to a certain extent, intelligence people can legally indicate to you whether something is true or false, but they're going to have a very tough time to doing that with foreign intelligence that, or intelligence on foreign governments that they may have. But we do have cases of people who are now, public figures who have said very directly on screen that they've examined stolen scientific reports from the reverse engineering programs of other governments. So, as an expert on this, I would say that claim is true.
Do we need a amnesty for prior crimes of covering this up, of UAP programs, of legacy programs if they exist? And should we have a church committee 2.0 to really examine these?
Well, yeah, that's a term I've put out there, and I've advocated for the idea that we should have something like another church committee. The church committee was the Senate hearing that, or the Senate committee that made pretty fulsome inquiries into the intelligence community in the 1970s, and that led to the establishment of the Senate's Intelligence Committee and the intelligence oversight that we have today. We probably need something like that because of UAP secrecy and probably some other things. Are we going to get it? Probably not right now. There's not a mood for that in the Senate, and for people in the Senate to go that far on this issue, they're going to have to understand the full implications of the fact that the legislative branch was completely cut out of governance of this issue. All governance has been in the executive branch, and that's not how the United States is supposed to work. We have separation of powers.
Dr. Peter Skafish from the Soul Foundation, appreciate your time and insight today.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thanks for having me
Thank
on.
you.